I'm going to give it a couple seconds so it doesn't cut my intro off. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cover One Roundup here live every Monday night on the Cover One YouTube channel and subsequently wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, Kyle Silagyi, joined this and every week by David Fox, Cover One writer, correspondent, contributing correspondent. I think what's my title? My title is lead correspondent. What's your official title, David?
Official title?
Were you given an official title?
No.
Oof.
I was brought on as an intern, if we want to call it that, and I wrote a bunch of articles during the season and filled in on the Roundup during the season, and then they were just like, "Hey, you've done enough for us for nothing. Why don't you just come on?" I guess my official title would be like co-host of the Cover One Roundup and also writer, etc.
Right, writer. That's a great title. That's a good resume title. See, that's what it's all about. It's all about the resume, right? Like blog writer, lead correspondent.
That's right.
That's way up there. That's like when I worked for the Bills, I was an intern. I did a lot of bitch work for the website, but my title was contributing correspondent, which the resume says contributing correspondent for the Buffalo Bills. That's like, what? What'd you do there?
Like,
I was an intern, but I immediately told them I was an intern. But anyway, so what are we doing today? We are ranking the Buffalo Bills competition in the AFC in a tier list. As you can see here, we are hopping on that 2018 YouTube trend. Please ignore these ads. I didn't choose them.
we are not sponsored by Arby's, but we can certainly get into contact with them.
Now
Arby's sponsor us.
The people are going to think like I'm some sort of weird person who was searching Arby's all day to, and now I'm getting Arby's personal ads. I have never Googled Arby's.
Did you know that Arby's bought Buffalo Wild Wings like a couple years ago? For like almost $1 billion or something like that.
That seems like a lot to spend on wings. I know market price is up right now.
So like my first thought was, why did Arby's buy Buffalo Wild Wings? And also, how does Arby's have almost $1 billion?
It's also a good question. Who is going to Arby's? Who is giving Arby's this money? Certainly not me. But
now they're definitely not sponsoring us.
Right, love you, Arby's. They have the meats. But yeah, in just a couple of moments here, we will go through this tier list, fill out the tier list, rank where we think or which tier we think each AFC team is in as we enter the 2022 season. But before we do that, we have a bit of housekeeping to get to. Subliminal messaging. Okay. So before we do that, we have to talk about a bit, not a schedule leak, because the Bills unveiled it themselves. The Bills today announced that they are hosting the Tennessee Titans in week 2 on Monday Night Football. That might be the home opener, because I think the rumor now is they're going to play the Rams week 1 in the NFL kickoff or whatever. So week 2, I mean, even if it's not the Rams, I mean, one could reasonably assume a primetime game week 2 that is the Bills home opener.
Yeah.
And it's against the Titans. That kind of stinks. Like, I'm happy that we are in. No, I'm past the state of like, oh, cool, the Bills are playing in primetime. That's awesome, because they've been doing it now for a couple of years. The Bills have been a good team for a couple of years. The shine of playing in primetime is kind of worn off on me. I'm kind of just like, I want to go to bed. I've reached the point where I'm 24. I want to go to bed.
Can we talk about that? Can we talk about that? Because like last year, so last year, as an East Coaster, I made myself get the task of writing these recaps right after the game, which meant that it didn't matter when it was played; it would have to be out there as soon as possible.
Yep.
So on a Sunday where I'm already working at a church in season, I'm waking up at 5:45. If the Bills played on primetime, I was asleep at 1 a.m.
They suck. It's
the worst. It's the worst.
I understand it's money, but it stinks.
I understand it's fun. I understand it's fun to see your team on like an ESPN graphic or an NBC Sunday Night Football graphic. I get it. As someone who has to work super late now because of this. I am over it, and give me every 1 p.m. kickoff possible.
I agree.
Even 4 p.m. I'm good with 4
That's
p.m.
better.
I'll do that with like Sunday night in the background, like that's fine. That's fine. Exhausting. Anyway, that's my struggle bus rant for the night.
Well, and I'm just tired of the Titans matchup. Like, this is a team that the Bills have played like 5 years in a row now. None of the games have been particularly entertaining. The last two have just been, I mean, you had last year, which was just Josh Allen slipping on 4th and 1 at the end of the game there, which was just devastating. And then the year before, when, there's an ongoing worldwide pandemic and the Titans just break every rule in the book that the NFL
and then they play victim afterwards, like, we banded together as a family.
And the narrative is, look at this adversity we had to overcome. And it's like, you did it. Like, I understand it's a pandemic, but you did this.
Jagweeds.
But hey, that was the narrative. Like, oh, look how strong they were in the face of a pandemic. They overcame this adversity and they were able to beat the Buffalo Bills. Like, whatever. Anyway, I'm not excited about the Bills playing the Titans again. Just it's a boring matchup. And the narratives every time are the same. It's, can the Bills find a way to handle Derrick Henry? And they largely do, except for 1 or 2 plays, which inevitably shift the tide of the game. And whatever. Whatever. We'll get into our Titans talk later, but those Bills Titans games just have bad energy, bad juju. And
always do.
Speaking of bad juju, we'll also talk about the Chiefs later and every other AFC team. And we also have to talk about this, which I was subliminally messaging earlier. The Giants today, they released James Bradberry, cornerback who they've been looking to trade all offseason. The Bills have been rumored to be at least interested. I don't know if there's been actual interest from Brandon Beane, but, kind of the tea leaves have been read. There have been some obvious parallels or connections drawn between James Bradberry and the Buffalo Bills, given that Joe Schoen the former assistant GM of the Bills, is now the GM of the Giants. Brandon Beane was on the Panthers in their front office when the Panthers selected James Bradberry in the 2016 draft. James Bradberry won a starting job as a rookie in Sean McDermott. I can't talk today. This is going to be a great podcast, David. In Sean McDermott's final defense in Carolina. So obviously the connections are there, and the Bills are a cornerback needy team. Their current depth chart at corner is Trey White, who's coming off an ACL injury. Brandon Beane seems confident that he'll be back in time for week 1, but we'll just have to wait and see how that heals. Rookies Kaiir Elam and Christian Benford, who's from Villanova. That tells you all you need to know about rookie Christian Benford, who then we talked about last week, maybe projects as a safety more than he projects as a corner. And then also Dane Jackson, Nick McLeod, and Saran Neal. So, I mean, after White and arguably Elam and arguably Jackson, there's a whole lot of question marks. And you can even call Jackson and Elam question marks if you want to. So, David,
you could call Trey White a question mark because we don't know when he's actually going to be available.
You could. I would listen to the argument that as of right now, all are question marks for one reason or another. So, David, given that James Bradberry is now on the open market, Bills wouldn't have to trade anything for him. And the Bills currently, according to Spotrac, have $7 million in salary cap space. Do you think the Bills are going to show any interest in James Bradberry here?
I'm sure they'll show some sort of interest, but it's going to come down to like, hey, how much money do you actually want for this year? Because I could see this being like a 1-year rental type of scenario, which would be great. But I don't know if like he's willing to take like a 1-year, $5 million deal. It just depends. And to be clear, I would love James Bradberry, especially over like Joe Hayden, who has been sort of the oft talked about veteran guy that they would bring in. Because Joe Hayden is just he's just old. I'm sorry, Joe Hayden is just old.
Yeah. Objectively,
yeah.
Old man.
I would love to have James Bradberry. I don't know how likely it is. Honestly, at this point, the one thing I want to have happen with James Bradberry is not even that he signs with the Bills, but that he just doesn't sign with like the Chiefs. Because if he goes to the Chiefs after they drafted Trent McDuffie and got that Wisconsin linebacker Leo Chenal and George Karlaftis. It's just that's not gonna make me feel good. That's not gonna make me feel confident about facing the Chiefs. But if he ends up going anywhere else, heck, even go to the Titans, I don't care. I'm sure they'll find a way to waste his career too. So
just like they did with Jack Rabbit Jenkins, NFL Hall of Famer waiting in the wings, and look what they did. They massacred my
Jack
boy.
Rabbit Jenkins wasted his career by going to the Giants and also getting cooked in deep coverage despite playing off all the time. But whatever.
And also changing his name to Jack Rabbit. And also there's a few other things that he did. But Bills haven't paid draft picks yet. So yes, it is less than $7 million. You are right, Spin. Thank you for that. And also the Bills like to have breathing room with salary cap space. Should something come up mid-season and they need to make a move, they like to have that room to operate. So they're already kind of strapped for cash and they still have to pay draft picks. So I don't know. I like the idea of James Bradberry, but unless he wants to take like a real discount, which again isn't out of the question given his familiarity with the staff, he may look at the situation and say, okay, they're a team that I could realistically go to and compete for a starting job at least early in the season. And also, if I stick around for the entire year, I have a real shot at winning a Super Bowl. So if he just wants to take a year where he gets paid less than he's worth and has a shot at a ring, and then he cashes it next year, which, I mean, we're at that time of year now where that might be the only contracts or the only looks that he's really getting. I can see that happening. But if he wants to be paid anything close to what he's worth, I don't think the Bills have the, facilities to get that done. Is that a correct term there?
We'll use it.
We'll use it. Again, smart Englishman Kyle coming up good. All right. So I think it's now time.
It is.
To get into the tier list. Okay, so if you guys haven't seen a tier list in a long time, I wouldn't blame you because this fad kind of died out. Which, hey man, it had a good life, and we're bringing it back. We are single-handedly bringing this back. Let me pause this ad so it doesn't continue playing the whole time. All right, so we have, as you guys can see down here, if you're listening on audio, on the screen right now is a tier list, and the tiers are S tier, which is the best tier. That's the Super Bowl tier. This is for teams that we think have a realistic shot at not only making, but winning the Super Bowl next year. Then we have the A tier, which is for astute. I did not look up the definition of astute before this, but I do believe it means like good, like, well balanced, well maintained.
Astute, having or showing an ability to accurately assess situations or people and turn this to one's advantage.
There you have it. These are the astute teams, the good above average teams. And then we have the B tier, which is just mid. I couldn't come up with a word for average that starts with B.
Mid works.
Mid. And then C is for crummy. That is self-explanatory, is for the crummy teams. And then we have D, which is for dog water teams like the Houston Texans. We'll get into them later. And then as you guys can see down here, not doing a great job of explaining this for audio listeners, but at the bottom I have all the logos for the AFC teams, and we will just get into them. So let's just start with the Buffalo Bills, because we spend every week talking about the Buffalo Bills.
We do?
I know, right? It's almost like this is a Bills channel. The Bills
I didn't know that was what we were talking about, but okay.
I think the Vegas odds have them as the Super Bowl favorite right now. To win the Super Bowl, let alone represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. So I think it's only fair that we put them in the Super Bowl tier. They're a good team. We are not saying anything new here. They got better. They were an already very good team who got better in the offseason with the additions of Von Miller, Roger Saffold, Jamison Crowder, and then drafting Kyle Elam, finally getting a solid, or hopefully getting a long-term upgrade at CB2 there over Levi Wallace, who wasn't a bad player, but hopefully long-term Kyle Elam offers more. Anything else to say about the Bills here other than they're kind of the barometer here that we're going to be judging these other teams against?
Josh Allen. Just, it's great to have a perennial MVP candidate as your quarterback. It's pretty great. It's also pretty cool. Like, I still sometimes think about the fact that I dreaded and abhorred the day that the Bills drafted Josh Allen in that moment. And now I look back and think, oh my God, I am such a stupid fool among fools. And now I have a Josh Allen framed autographed jersey as a way of saying, I'm sometimes wrong, and by sometimes I mean often.
Mm-hmm. You know how Steve Tasker tells a story where it's like he's talked to 200,000 people who have been to or who have claimed to have been in the stadium for the greatest comeback game. I feel like anyone who says like, "Oh yeah, I was cool when the Bills drafted Josh Allen on draft night," it's like, "No, you weren't."
Liars.
Right? No, you
Absolute
weren't.
liars.
Like I do know of a few people who at the time were trying to sell me on the pick or trying to sell others on the pick who were genuinely happy about Josh Allen and liked his upside. But the vast majority of people were like, no, this is a bad pick. I was one of those.
To be clear, for good reason, right? Like historically speaking, big, tall, strong-armed, raw, low playing time quarterbacks tended to not work out in the NFL. You have a lot of things going against you. Josh Allen just, is a different guy, work ethic speaking, and just the amount of work that he's put into fixing a lot of his mechanics and whatnot. But also just like going to a team that actually believed in him, had a plan for him, and executed that plan. They didn't have their offensive coordinator. He had his same offensive coordinator for 4 years. That's crazy. He had the same quarterback coach for 3 of those years. And he's a good quarterback coach. And somebody who worked with somebody similar to him in Cam Newton in Carolina. And he had great receivers that got better each year, like going from, what was it, Kelvin Benjamin, Zay Jones, and Andre Holmes to John Brown and Cole Beasley, and then Stephon Diggs and Beasley and Gabe Davis. I mean, it's just constant improvements. Not to mention all the upgrades on the offensive line. Josh Allen is Josh Allen, and he's amazing.
Bills are a good team. So again, we will now be going through the rest of the teams, determining who poses a threat to the Bills in the AFC, if anyone. And there are a couple teams. That was one of the things that I took away from here while I was prepping for this episode. It was good and bad news. The bad news was that there are a lot of good teams in the AFC. Good news is that the Bills are probably the best of them on paper. The Bills roster on paper is absolutely loaded. So let's move on now here to the Cincinnati Bengals, who did represent the AFC in the Super Bowl last year, coming off of a 10-7 season. Of course, lost to the Rams in the Super Bowl. Offseason additions, they entered the offseason in a fortunate spot where they were a team coming off of a Super Bowl loss, but with a very young roster, with a very glaring. I'll figure it out. I promise by the end of this show, I will be able to speak English. Lafayette writes, wrong. Raiders win the Super Bowl. You just wait and see. You wait and see where I have the Raiders. I have a special tier for the Raiders above Super Bowl.
Ooh.
Yeah, guarantee it. So yes, they entered the offseason with a young, good team and one glaring weakness, and that was the offensive line, and they attacked the offensive line in the offseason, signing Alex Kappa, Ted Karras, also re-signing B.J. Hill, which was a big re-sign for them. He was probably high on the offseason priority list of a lot of other teams. Had a really nice year with Cincinnati last year. They also signed Hayden Hurst and Lael Collins. Losses include, this is a big one, Quentin Spain. Devastating loss.
Yeah. It's pretty devastating to lose the offensive lineman that gave up your game-losing sack in the Super Bowl. It's pretty rough.
I just remember Quentin Spain in that week leading up to the Super Bowl was doing press, and he was like kind of talking poorly about McDermott, and it was like, this is the one time Quentin Spain has the high ground over Sean McDermott, and he is taking advantage of it. But hey, I don't think he's signed anywhere yet. Also, they lost C.J. Uzama and Larry Ogunjobi. And then in the draft, they get Daxton Hill and Cam Taylor-Britt. They really attacked the secondary there. Daxton Hill, Very fun prospect. Kind of surprised that he lasted until Cincinnati's pick there. And then just looking at their roster, again, it's so difficult. I'm just going to tell you right now, I have them somewhere between S and A, probably higher A as opposed to lower S. But it's just so difficult because I was somebody who really wasn't bought in on the Bengals at all last year. I do. My sister's in like a pick'em league at her job, and she knows nothing about football. So every week she just sends me picks or the games, and I have to pick who I think is going to win. And
my mom does this with me, so I'm familiar with this.
I typically did pretty well, but one team that I was not good at was the Cincinnati Bengals, because every week I would be like, okay, this is the week that we learn who the Bengals are. Oh, okay, they're going to lose. This is where, this is where it falls apart. This is where we figure out Zach Taylor's a fraud, etc. Well, she still may be, but like every week I was like, okay, this is the end. But it just kept going and going. Joe Burrow kept showing out. Jamar Chase just kept keeping them in games. It is crazy that Jamar Chase, that the drafting of a wide receiver actually helped this team win games, actually helped turn that offense into one of the league's most proficient, most explosive. Joe Mixon had a great season. And just looking at this offense right now, you got Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, that revamped offensive line with Jonah Williams and Jackson Carman, the only two remaining starters. This is going to be, dare I say, an improved offense, an even better offense than we had, or than they had last year. And then defensively, Sam Hubbard, DJ Reader, BJ Hill, Trey Hendrickson, who had a really good year last year on that defensive line. And then again, the secondary kind of bolstered there. ESPN lists Daxton Hill as the backup corner to Eli Apple. That's interesting. But
that's no, like Daxton Hill. The book on Daxton Hill coming out was he's either going to be a starting safety or he has the versatility to play nickel. Well, the Bengals already have two starting safeties and they're starting nickel because they have Mike Hilton. So I actually have no idea where Daxton Hill's going to play in year one, but whatever. So like when it comes to Cincinnati, like they obviously improved their offensive line, which was the biggest need. That was the most obvious glaring need, maybe in the NFL, was just like, hey, the Bengals need offensive line help. A lot of what they did offensively was predicated on big plays, particularly to Jamar Chase.
Yes.
That is not necessarily something that is sustainable year to year.
That's what the lamestream media wants you to think.
Now, they also have T. Higgins, who is a legitimate, like probably one of the best wide receiver twos you can ask for in the NFL.
Yeah,
like he is
maybe the best top three receivers in the league.
Yeah,
with Chase, Higgins, Boyd.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy how good that trio of receivers is. And I think what these offensive line improvements are going to do is really give them more of a balance in the run game that they've wanted. Now, there's a ton of talent on this offense. The only thing that's going to hold them back is going to be Zach Taylor, because I am still not convinced.
Zach Taylor, truther.
Look,
brother in arms. I
Zach
agree.
Taylor,
I'm not sold on Zach Taylor.
Zach Taylor has done a fine job of keeping his staff and his players believing in him, despite two really atrocious first two seasons in Cincinnati. And I don't say that in like a condescending way. It takes a lot to like have people really believe in you and feel like you're going in the right direction, or at the very least have them respect you. Like Joe Judge did not do that. Matt Patricia could not do that. Urban Meyer very, very clearly did not do that. So there's something there. My issue with Zach Taylor is just that people assume that because he came from the Rams that they just sort of run a like diet version of the Rams mixed in with some like LSU concepts that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are familiar with. And I'm sure some of that is true, but the way they actually run their offense is more like what Zach Taylor learned from his first mentor, and that was Mike Sherman, which is essentially that like the types of formations and designs that they do for the run game are like completely siloed off from the types of things that they do in the pass game. Nothing really like gels or meshes or moves together in a natural way. Like if it's almost like if they line up in a particular formation or personnel grouping, it's like, oh, this is their run set or this is their run formation. And it's obvious. There's no and then from there it's just like, well, why do you do this? Like pretty much every modern offense, high school, college, NFL, doesn't do this. This is the sort of thing that Mike Sherman did when he was the Texas A&M offensive coordinator or head coach or whatever he was. But like, I don't really get it, and so I think that purely based on talent, Cincinnati will be a playoff contending team. And the unsung hero of this Cincinnati team is probably their defensive coordinator. Do you know who the name of their defensive coordinator, Kyle? Because it took me a very long time to actually remember what this dude's name is.
If you gave me 10 minutes, which we don't have, I'd be able to come up with it. But is it no? What is it?
It's Lou Anarumo.
I was gonna say it's Italian.
It is Italian.
It's and Italian.
If you don't recall the coaching search that the Bengals did, first of all, Zach Taylor was like their fifth. No, he wasn't their fifth, but he wasn't like a super sought after name at that point. And then when he came on and they were looking for a defensive coordinator, there were like 4 or 5 different people that passed up that job because they didn't want to go to Cincinnati because they were a dumpster fire at that point. And with the way Cincinnati runs their whole franchise, there was nobody who was like, no, I'm not like going to be a defensive coordinator for a crappy team where I have 100% more responsibilities than I do with another crappy team.
Right. They run it like a small mom and pop shop, but
they do
an NFL franchise.
And it almost won them a Super Bowl.
But it's not that almost won them a Super Bowl. They like, almost won it in spite of it or despite it.
But the thing is, like, despite the fact that I could be wrong, but I feel like 2 of the names that I remember that passed up that job were Jack Del Rio,
I remember,
who is now in Washington, and I think Aaron Glenn, who is still in New Orleans as the defensive backs coach and is now in Detroit as the defense coordinator. I remember there were probably a couple others that got passed up, but then they eventually settled on Lou Anarumo. I was like, who the heck is this dude? And let me tell you something. That dude kind of like really knows what he's doing. And I remember, I forget which podcast this was or who even said it, but essentially what they did throughout the whole season was just like install something new every week, which again is very unusual for an NFL team or any football team to be doing installs for things like that. But it's how they just got different types of coverages in the season. And when they got into the playoffs, they got so good defensively. They were amazing on defense in the playoffs. And especially like in that Chiefs game, they ran a ton of 3-man rush, which like completely flabbergasted and confused Patrick Mahomes into a point where it basically broke him. He didn't know what to do with that. Man, we're spending a lot of time just on the Bengals.
Well, no, because they're one of the more interesting teams because they were such a Cinderella out of nowhere team last year to go from a team that a lot of people thought would be picking in the top 5 probably to losing in the Super Bowl and addressing their biggest need in the offseason. So it's difficult to judge. Are they going to continue to build on that and become like an actual Super Bowl contender, a team that can win the Super Bowl, or are they going to fall back down to earth a little bit?
I feel like the passing game for the Bengals probably takes a step down, but the run game improves and the defense generally stays steady. I think they probably, in all likelihood, match their win total from last year, but I don't think they win their division, and I think they'll have to really compete for a wild card spot. I think it's going to be tough. So I would put them. What's the second tier? It's very
astute.
Astute.
Can I zoom in? Let's see if I can zoom in. If so, that's huge. Whoa!
There you go.
Look at that.
All right, so Do you
we're
feel
going to
we're going to go
tentatively
I'm okay
put
with that.
them
I'm okay with
at the
that.
top of A tier. We will reassess at the end of the stream, see where the other teams have matched up here, where they've ranked, and then if we feel that we need to adjust it after that, we will. But tentatively, the Bengals, Joe Burrow, Joe Shiesty, they're there in A tier. See, and I could see the season not just as easily going one of two ways, but I could see them being like, either in the AFC Championship again or having to hire Super Bowl winning quarterbacks coach Joe Brady as their head coach at the end of next season. Like, I could just as easily see that, or not just, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Moving on here to the Denver Broncos, another team that made some noise this offseason. Went 7-10 last season. That was last in the AFC West. Fire Vic Fangio in the offseason. Hire Nathaniel Hackett, and they trade for Russell Wilson from the Seattle Seahawks, giving up Noah Fant, Drew Lock, which I know it's a tough piece to part with Drew Lock there.
It is tough to lose your top cheerleader. That is tough. How do you feel about being bland?
I'm an idiot. I'm simply an idiot. There are probably a ton of words I could have gone with instead of mid. It doesn't start with B. I just, I was in a crunch for time, needed something, so we went with a word that doesn't even start with B. So yes, the Bengals go out there and acquire Russell Wilson, one of the better quarterbacks in the. Or what did I say? You
said Bengals.
I mean, again, reiterate, I am an idiot. Broncos go out there and hire Russell Wilson, getting one of the better quarterbacks in the league, pairing him with Nathaniel Hackett also in the offseason, adding DJ Jones and Randy Gregory. Randy Gregory, who reportedly had agreed to go back to Dallas, then changing his mind, going to Denver. Offseason losses, again, Noah Fant, Drew Lock, Kyle Fuller, Bobby Massey, who started 13 games for them at tackle, Alexander Johnson, who was like irrelevant and then one of the best linebackers in the league for a minute and then irrelevant again. Wild career trajectory there for Alexander Johnson. Also losing Bryce Callahan in the draft, adding Nick Bonino, Greg Dulcich. Those are really their only two picks of note because they traded all their other picks. Again, interesting team because the Broncos have been a team now for a couple of years that we've said they're a quarterback away, right? They have the receiving core. They have Jerry Jeudy. They have Cortland Sutton. And now they have Javonte Williams. They do re-sign Melvin Gordon. They have the weapons. They have the team potentially to compete for a Super Bowl. They just didn't have the quarterback to get them there. They go out and get a Super Bowl winning quarterback in Russell Wilson. But are they in the Super Bowl tier, David?
No. Here's the thing with the Broncos. For a couple of years, we've kind of said, or the narrative around the Broncos has been, they're a quarterback away. Their defense is elite. They have, great running backs, et cetera, et cetera. That defense last year was not great. I believe, Richard coming in here. Their defense was kind of overrated. 20th in DVOA. It wasn't great last year, and they kind of got worse, like personnel wise. And if you're not having a genuine defensive genius like Vic Fangio running your defense, and you have, I don't even know who is their defensive coordinator. Let's actually let's do some. Well, I'll have my producer do some research right now.
Pull that up.
So they're coming in. Ajiro Evero.
Good name.
Is someone I've never heard of, so we're gonna.
What do you mean you've never heard of him?
We're gonna have our producer do a little research on Ajiro Rivera. All right, so he was assistant coach, offensive assistant, defensive assistant for the 49ers in 2014, 2015. Okay, so he kind of comes from that like Brandon Staley tight front type of defense, which makes sense because that's also a Fangio thing. I don't know. Like Russell Wilson definitely changes things, but Russell Wilson is also not flawless either. Like Russell Wilson, it didn't matter who Seattle brought in as their offensive coordinator. They basically just ran the same offense because Russell Wilson's always going to do the exact same thing. He's going to chuck it deep because he's one of the best deep ball passers in NFL history, and he's going to scramble around and make magic out of nothing. But he's not going to run like a quote unquote Nathaniel Hackett offense. whatever that means. I'm still not convinced we've actually seen what a Nathaniel Hackett offense actually is, because the last time he was the play caller on his own, I mean, the times where he's been the play caller has been in Buffalo with a combination of EJ Manuel, Jeff Toole, and Kyle Orton. And then he went to Jacksonville with Blake Bortles. And then he went to Green Bay to be their offensive coordinator. And Matt LaFleur was the one calling plays there. I still don't know what a Nathaniel Hackett offense is. And we're not going to see it because Russell Wilson's going to run his offense, because that's what he does. And that's fine. Russell Wilson is obviously better than all the crap they've been trotting out there for the last 5 years, but it's not perfect. There's going to be times where they lose a game because of that, I think. And if the defense is not what they want it to be in that division, it's going to be tough. It's just going to be tough. I think they are mid until proven otherwise.
Mid?
I think they're mid until proven otherwise.
Ooh, that's tough. I'm looking at their depth chart here.
It's not. I don't want this to just be like, I'm a Denver hater and I don't believe in Russell Wilson, blah, 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 blah. A lot of this really just has to do with inexperience, sort of across. There's a lot of moving pieces that are coming into Denver.
A lot of question marks, hypotheticals,
in a division that is the toughest in football. It's tough. It's the toughest division in football, and it's going to be tough for a quarterback who's never played in Denver, more than once in a single season, probably, and then to have a first-year head coach with a lot of not super experienced staff members. It seems like it's going to be tough. This does not mean that their Super Bowl aspirations with Russell Wilson are dead. Like, they could still have this role for 2 or 3 years. I'm just saying for this year, it's going to be tough for them. I need to see it to believe it with the Broncos. So I am putting them at mid.
They are in the group of death, right? Their division. Yeah. Every team besides the Chiefs got better this offseason, and the Chiefs are still a good team. As Jenna writes here, we still haven't seen them mold together. Facts. That is true, but it's difficult for me to look at it. I understand we haven't seen them together, but on paper, the offense of Russell Wilson, Javonte Williams, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler.
I'm with you.
It's hard for me to look at that and then say, yeah, it's a mid team, because I can understand. I can buy the point that the defense was overrated, but was it bad? I don't know.
Was it good? It was below average.
Maybe the defense is mid, but is the offense enough to kind of propel it into A tier?
I don't think that they will be consistent enough, especially coming out of the gate, for me to feel like, or it's going to go the way of Russell Wilson, where they do start hot out of the gate,
right? Or he's an MVP contender, and
then, right. I mean, it could go either way. So I'm slotting them mid.
Again, this is tentative. We'll reassess at the end.
Yeah.
But you've sold me, David. I'll put them in mid for now. Moving on to Cleveland. They didn't do anything controversial this offseason. Not at all.
No.
They finished 8-9 last season, third in the AFC North. Again, this was a team that a lot of people had we been making this tier list last year, a lot of people would have had Cleveland in the Super Bowl tier. Take a step back last year, again, finished 8-9. But in the offseason, they address the position that some people feel was holding them back in the quarterback position, acquiring Deshaun Watson.
The nasty man.
Deshaun Watson is now a Cleveland Brown. We now have to talk about Deshaun Watson again. Also getting Amari Cooper. Do you know they signed Corey Bojorquez?
Did they really?
They did. Corey Bojorquez is a Brown. Also trading for Chase Winovich, who we've talked about far too often on this podcast. I feel like we've talked about Chase Winovich a lot, despite Chase Winovich accomplishing nothing in the NFL. Also signing Taven Bryan, which again, they're both just names at this point. They're just names who were draft crushes a couple years ago, but really haven't done much of anything in the NFL. Besides Taven Bryan, who had 2 sacks against the Bills in that Jags game. So Bills fans will know the name Taven Bryan, but other than that, probably not going to be much of a factor. And then offseason losses, Jarvis Landry, Jadeveon Clowney. They didn't pick until the 3rd round in the draft this year because, again, Deshaun Watson. But they got Martin Emerson, David Bell, Perry and Winfrey. not a bad draft considering the situation they were in. Like, actually a pretty solid haul, but I don't know where to put them. I really don't, because look, Baker was not good last season, right?
Yeah,
Baker
was atrocious.
Yes. And that's coming from someone who really still likes Baker Mayfield, who still thinks Baker Mayfield can be a good quarterback if put in the right situation. But you could also say, what better situation is he going to be in than the one he just got out of? But anyway, they do upgrade at quarterback. At least the Deshaun Watson that we last saw was playing at an MVP level. I don't know if he's the same player. You can assume that he is still of that caliber because he is only a year removed from that, and he's still in his mid-20s. But it's difficult to talk about Deshaun Watson just given everything.
Nasty, man.
Right. And then Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper's a very underrated wide receiver. Now he's going to an offense where, I mean, what else do they have besides Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, wide receiver wise? What do they have in Cleveland? Donovan Peoples-Jones,
David Bell
now.
David Bell.
So a whole lot of question marks besides Amari Cooper, who is going to be a very good wide receiver next year. Then they have David Njoku at tight end. Defensively, Myles Garrett. ESPN has Taven Bryan and Chase Winovich starting. Interesting. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who fell in the draft last year for a heart condition that ended up being nothing apparently, and then he played incredibly last year as well. And then secondary, Denzel Ward, Grant Delpit, John Johnson, Greg Newsome. Fun secondary there, a fun team, but it all rides on Deshaun Watson. What do we think Deshaun Watson is going to be coming back from his year vacation? I guess we can call it a year, whatever you want to call that.
But the nasty man does change things for them, right? Like, whatever you might think of the nasty man, he is a genuinely great quarterback, objectively a great quarterback. But like, there's just there's a lot of unknowns, and like, for as much talent as they've kind of sunk into this defense at various positions, they're still very weak at defensive tackle, which has been their problem since Kevin Stefanski took over as head coach and they put Joe Woods as the defensive coordinator. It feels like the problems they had in year one with that defense kind of plagued them again in year two. And now we're in year three saying, oh, well, maybe things will improve in year three. It's like, I don't know, maybe. But they might just end up being the same sort of team that they were maybe in year one with Stefanski. So I'm okay with putting, a lot of people are saying B. I think B is probably the right place for them. Just because like where they're weak, they're pretty darn weak. And there's a lot of question marks at receiver. Obviously, like Amari Cooper is going to be legit for them. I fully believe that. And that's probably like one of the most underrated moves of the entire offseason. The fact they got where everybody else is trading away stupid picks and money to get wide receivers. They got Amari Cooper for a fifth from Dallas because Dallas just could not afford to keep him. Craziness. But there's question marks at receiver. They do have two really good tight ends in Njoku and Harrison Bryant. I just am not 100% like sold on where this defense is gonna lie. I don't know where maybe there's a suspension for the nasty man in this year. Maybe it comes next year. I don't know. It just depends. So I'm okay. And especially again in that division where like even the worst team, whoever you think the worst team might be, Pittsburgh, they're still going to be a competitive team. So I think that I think mid is appropriate for the Cleveland Browns.
I have to agree because I mean, see that's difficult though because we know what they did with Stefanski in year one and then last year still an 8-win team with Baker Mayfield, just adding Deshaun Watson. I guess again it's all question marks and that receiving core is full with a lot of question marks there. So I guess B until proven otherwise, innocent until proven guilty. Oof.
God.
Moving on to the Los Angeles Chargers, another fun team. 9-8 last season, third in the AFC West. Could have made the playoffs had they just kind of run out the clock there in overtime against the Raiders. Chose not to, chose to try to win the game because you play to win the game. And now we're, now we're in a situation where
now we're back where we always are with the Chargers, right? The offseason hype train is in full gear.
It happens every year.
It's always the media that are hyping up the Chargers because they don't really have any fans. Everyone's in love with them. Everybody thinks they can do it. And I hate myself that I am jumping on this bandwagon too. Because I know it's going to bite me in the ass. I know it's the wrong decision. I know I shouldn't be doing this. I feel like an idiot doing it, and I'm going to do it anyway.
Right. Well, it's what's the old saying? Like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Like I understand if that's how you feel, but also this feels different. Like they had Phillip Rivers before. Like all these prior times when people are hyping up the Chargers, they have old Phillip Rivers, who wasn't bad, never was like a bad quarter.
Slander Phillip Rivers.
I know, right? This is the first time I pissed David off in podcast history. It's Phillip Rivers talks like, I can't believe this. But yeah, so Justin Herbert, like there are like 3 demigod quarterbacks in the AFC. Josh Allen's one of them. Justin Herbert's another one. And then Patrick Mahomes, who we'll get to with the next team, is the other. But Justin Herbert is just an insane quarterback. Yeah. Just seriously an insane quarterback. I think you are in Super Bowl maybe not contention, but you are in the conversation. You're not laughed out of the conversation when you have a player like Justin Herbert as your quarterback. Yeah. Looking at the rest of their team, their additions, J.C. Jackson, Khalil Mack, who they traded a second-round draft pick for, also getting Austin Johnson, one of the more underrated moves of the offseason. Great addition there. Also Kyle Van Noy, Gerald Everett, losing Linval
Joseph Day, who was like a key cog for that Rams defense for the last 2 years, including when Brandon Staley was there.
And then Linval Joseph, they lose, who's still unsigned, I do believe. Uchenna Nwosu, Andre Roberts is a big loss, apparently. And then Chris Harris. And then drafting Zion Johnson. Great selection there in the middle of the first round. JT Woods, Isaiah Spiller. Looking at their offense here, Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Gerald Everett, their offensive line, Rashawn Slater, Zion Johnson there slotting in at right guard. Defensively, Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack.
I like this analysis. But they won't get out of the divisional round. That's exactly what's going to happen, right? They could win that division. They could be the number 1 seed. And then they will lose in the divisional round because they're the freaking Chargers. I could totally see that happening. What
boneheaded coaching decision is Brandon Staley going to make to make them lose the divisional round?
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine? Oh my, Twitter's going to be insufferable when that happens. Not if it happens, when it happens. Let's be very clear. This Chargers team has a ton of talent, and
Brandon Staley's a competent coach for them. I like Brandon Staley.
I like Brandon Staley. I want to be clear that I like Brandon Staley. He makes some very odd decisions sometimes, though.
He does.
I think he might be the only coach that is like too committed to going for it on 4th down. he might be like Harbaugh is like riding that line a little bit too, but like Brandon Staley is like, I don't care. We're going for it on 4th down. Like I don't care. And like when you have Justin Herbert, most of your wild swashbuckling decision making is gonna go your way.
Yeah,
but sometimes it's a little weird. It gets a little dicey for them. And the other thing that concerns me really is their offensive coordinator, Joe Lombardi, who I think is just really bland. I don't think he lets Joe Burrow cook, or not Joe Burrow. I don't think he lets Justin Herbert cook.
You're right. Enough. He does not let Joe Burrow cook.
I mean, it sounds really weird to say that considering the season that Justin Herbert had last year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the dude threw for over 5,000 yards. He threw for over 5,000 yards last year. That's insane.
That is insane.
My God.
That is insane. He's so good.
38 touchdowns, 15 picks. It still just sort of feels like, I don't know, there's something weird about the way that offense is run. And I like getting Isaiah Spiller in the 4th round is really great for them. I think he's a great compliment to Austin Eckler. Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. There's some really great weapons. That offensive line is continuously improving year after year. They have Corey Linsley. They got Zion Johnson, who's going to be a great starter for them year one. Rashawn Slater was incredible at left tackle last year for them.
Yep.
Absolutely incredible. But it's the Chargers, and it's sort of like the Bengals last year, right? It's like, I'm not really going to believe in them until they actually do something that is un-Bengalsy or un-Chargersy.
I am ready to be hurt again, though.
That's right. Exactly. So we're going to put them in the A tier, and we're ready.
It's hard not to.
They should be in the A tier. They should be in the A tier. The problem is they're going to find a way to waste that.
They are. Hey, but they should make the playoffs. I mean, you are so right, though, about the media hype train every year with the Chargers. It's been happening for so long with like, oh, no, they're a sneaky Super Bowl team. And it's like, are they really a sneaky Super Bowl team? Okay. But this year it's like, no, they're not. There's nothing sneaky about it. Like, this is a very good team who got better in the offseason. Let's see how they managed to miss the playoffs. Okay, moving on. The Kansas City Chiefs. Again, every single time I've said interesting because every single team is interesting, maybe besides the Jaguars and the Texans, which we'll get to. We are an hour deep. We're through 4 teams.
Let's just move. Let's just keep moving. Come on.
Kansas City Chiefs 12-5 last year. Did not represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. Almost did for a third consecutive year, I believe, but did not. Lost in overtime in the AFC Championship game. Did they get better in the offseason? Probably not. Additions, Juju Smith-Schuster, great addition there. Ronald Jones, Justin Reed, unironic good addition. Lonnie Johnson, Deion Bush. Losses, Tyreek Hill, who they traded to the Miami Dolphins. Tyrann Mathieu, who just signed with the Saints, correct?
Yes.
Also lost Jaron Reed, Charvarius Ward, Byron Pringle, and Demarcus Robinson. Had a very good draft. This has kind of been the biggest critique of the Kansas City Chiefs of this recent, pseudo dynasty under Brett Veach and Andy Reid. One of the biggest concerns or biggest question marks has been Veach's drafting ability, but on paper has constructed a really good draft this year. Trent McDuffie, George Karlaftis, Sky Moore, Leo Chenal, Darian Kennard. Very good draft class, but looking at what they've lost, they lose one. Look, they have Patrick Mahomes, so to say the most dynamic piece of their offense, it would be incorrect, but losing their most dynamic skill position player probably, or a dynamic weapon in Tyreek Hill, probably one of the more dynamic receivers in the league. They lose him, and then also lose Tyrann Mathieu, who, say what you will about his individual performance last year, was a big part of that defense, a big part of the locker room. But they do well in the draft with McDuffie, Karlaftis, Sky Moore, who let's look at the receiving core here. Let's look at the weapons that Patrick Mahomes is going to have to work with.
So let's talk about that, because obviously losing Tyreek Hill is big because he's just such a unique player. And so borderline unstoppable, especially when you have someone like Mahomes who can throw the way that he does. I think the Chiefs just sort of came down to like that scene in Moneyball where it's like, guys, you keep trying to replace Giambi and we can't do it. But what we might be able to do is recreate him in the aggregate. Mm-hmm. And so what they end up doing is something that they have not been able, or just haven't had since Mahomes has been the quarterback, which is like more than a single option at receiver. They have Juju Smith-Schuster, who can play the slot. They drafted Sky Moore so he can be on the outside. And then they signed Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who has been a deep threat for the Packers the last couple of years. So, like, there's a very reasonable path where it's like, this team is not maybe going to have the same level of insane explosion that the Mahomes teams in the past have had, but they might end up being a better offense that has better answers for what NFL defenses are going to throw at them.
More balanced.
Yeah. When you have more than just a single option of Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce, and you can just say, they're covering Scantling deep, they've got Kelce covered underneath, well, Juju or Sky Moore is probably open. and they might do something with the ball. It's like this team now has like more than a single answer for something. And more than that, like Ronald Jones I totally forgot that Ronald Jones went to the Chiefs. I'm not a huge Ronald Jones believer, but he's definitely better than the running backs that they have had and currently have on the roster other than him. I mean, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not it. It sucks because he was a fun player at LSU, but he ain't it. I think Ronald Jones is going to at least give them something that they've been needing in the run game. I am this past draft. I mean, we already talked about it a little bit. McDuffie, Karlaftis, Leo Chenal, really, really great picks that are going to help that defense. I think Leo Chenal and Nick Bolton are going to end up being a really underrated pair of linebackers in the NFL. That being said, I think the potential improvements for this defense and they did sign Justin Reed at safety, which is a really important signing for them because he's a really good safety as well. However, I think I don't know if there's enough. I think the improvements that are going to come to this defense, and I think they will come, aren't necessarily all going to come in 2022. I think it'll probably be 2023. That being said, I'm still putting them in the S tier.
I agree. There's really no other place to put them. I mean, this is a team that they've had the Bills number for a couple of years now. Get rid of that one win that the Bills had against them in the regular season last year. The Bills have beat them, or the Chiefs have beat them in the playoffs each of the last 2 seasons. And again, they have Patrick Mahomes. They still have Andy Reid. Again, it is difficult to look at the defense and say it is going to improve when a lot of that optimism is based on the selections of George Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie. So it's difficult to be like, oh yeah, the rookies are going to take it to that next level immediately. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case, but I agree long-term that will lead to those defensive improvements. But again, Justin Reid, I think, does help that defensive unit. And then, as you said, with the receiving core or just the weapons in general, it's a more balanced group now. They might not have the big playability of Tyreek Hill or the blow the field open or whatever, but they can get things done in numerous ways now. And they still have Mecole Hardman, still have Travis Kelce, still a dangerous offensive unit. And anytime you have Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, you are a dangerous offensive unit. So yes, unless they come out of the gate like they did last season, I do think they are in the S tier for now.
Yeah.
Moving on. Indianapolis. Why did so many damn teams trade for quarterbacks this year? Indianapolis went 9-8 last year. Indianapolis, an interesting team. Did I say Patrick Mahomes? If so, it's because I was caught my breath, or I'm losing my mind. I am losing my train of thought in rapid succession. Whatever I say, you know what I'm talking about. Patrick Mahomes from State Farm. Okay, Indianapolis. A lot of people like mid last season or late last season were like, you do not want to draw Indianapolis in the playoffs. They are the best team in football right now. They are an incredible team. They are just, they'll run over you. Jonathan Taylor should be MVP. And then they didn't make the playoffs because
Carson Wentz did Carson Wentz things and shot himself in the foot repeatedly.
They lose to the Jacksonville Jaguars in the final week of the season. Can you imagine a team losing to the Jacksonville Jaguars? I could never imagine that.
No.
Could never imagine a team doing that. That's a ridiculous idea. But they do go out in the offseason, acquire Matt Ryan, who, look, they were a team that was maybe a competent quarterback away. We said it about Denver, but like Indy, maybe more so, was a competent quarterback away from just being a contender, being a playoff team. They go out and they get a very competent quarterback in Matt Ryan. Don't give up too much to get him either. Also get Yannick Ngakoue from the Raiders. Stephon Gilmore in free agency, also signing Rodney McLeod. Losses Carson Wentz again. Huge loss. He's there in Washington now. How is Carson Wentz still being looked at as a potential starting quarterback in the NFL? I will never understand it.
The fact that in his opening press conference, he said he was surprised by how things ended with the Colts, and he's wearing a suit that's like red and gold, and he looks like hot dog guy from the video who's like, "We're all trying to find the guy who did this."
He did look like Tim Robinson.
So perfect, so freaking perfect. So the Colts are really interesting because their defense with Matt Eberflus has been really, really good the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
DeForest Buckner is a fantastic player. Darius Leonard is a fantastic player. They've gotten really good safety play from guys like Justin Blackman and Kari Willis, and they've had some just really good players. They have Yannick Ngakoue now.
Yep.
They have they drafted Nick Cross, who a lot of people liked.
Yep, they got him great value.
Yeah, they got Alec Pierce, who I wanted for the Bills.
Jelani Woods, Bernard Raymond.
Jelani Woods. Yeah, I mean, they what Chris Ballard did in this draft is like a masterclass in what you can do without a first-round pick. Like, a first-round pick is not an excuse to have a crappy draft. Like, he totally showed that. I like Matt Ryan, and I especially like Matt Ryan in this offense. I think there are some people who, like, I don't think they really understand like how smart and how good he is, and how much it doesn't really matter what his physical tool set is at the moment. Like, he's just so much smarter than most people on the field, if not everyone on the field. He is he's going to be a really good upgrade for them. My biggest question mark for this team really is that defense, because losing Matt Eberflus is one thing. Replacing him with Gus Bradley is confusing. And Gus Bradley is a perfectly fine and decent defensive coordinator, but he is so freaking stuck on that cover 3 Seattle system and doesn't do anything to change that at all. Like, it was an upgrade for the Raiders to go from Paul, what's his name, that they had in previous years with Gruden, to Gus Bradley, because Gus Bradley just can coach up a defense better than the other guy did. Again, I cannot think of this dude's name, and it's making me mad. But going from Matt Eberflus to Gus Bradley is a downgrade, in my opinion, and it's a confusing one. I really can't make sense of this. And especially because they also brought in Stephon Gilmore, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And Gilmore is a press man corner. Yeah. And like at a certain point, zone coverage becomes man coverage. I get that. But like the way that they play that defense, it doesn't really make sense to me. I don't really get this choice in defensive coordinator to replace Matt Eberflus. So to me, I think they're going to have to be a mid-tier team. And part of that is the downgrade from Eberflus to Bradley in my mind. But it's also just like one of their biggest holes was going to be left tackle. And for the future, I think they have filled it, or at least on paper have filled it by drafting Bernard Raymond.
Yeah.
But
he's not starting year one. Not
a Central Michigan left tackle.
Who is new to the position.
Yeah, like that's a lot to ask of a dude. And so I don't know if that's necessarily going to be. I love the pick. And I think it's more than possible that he becomes like a solid starting left tackle for them. But I would be very, very surprised if he is that type of player that they need him to be in year one. So I'm putting them at mid. I think they will compete for the division. I think they could even win their division.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't feel great about it.
Yeah, no, they're again, interesting team. That's the buzzword today. Right. Because you look at that offense, Jonathan Taylor, who I kind of made fun of the MVP hype a couple minutes ago, but no, it was warranted. He was having an incredible year, just in a really good season there for Jonathan Taylor. And then they upgraded quarterback with Matt Ryan. They still have a fun receiving core. I'm not going to say a good receiving core, but an interesting, potentially good receiving core. Michael Pittman had a really nice year.
Yeah. I think Frank Reich knows. I think Frank Reich knows exactly what he wants to do with those guys. So I think it's going to be interesting with them.
Right. And given that you have Jonathan Taylor, you don't. I mean, obviously you'd like good receivers, but you you can kind of live with a Michael Pittman-led receiving core when you have the best running back in football.
Yeah. Plus, you have Nyheim Hines, who is like if you want a receiving back, that's what you want.
Yeah,
is someone like Nyheim Hines. But yeah, I think mid is pretty much where we can agree with this.
I think mid with potential to make some noise. Like, I mean, that's pretty much every team in this category is show me. It is you have the potential to make some noise, go make it. Yeah. Whereas that's exactly what the Chargers are as well. But we're a little higher on the Chargers.
We've got 9 teams left and less than an hour before.
You telling me we're in turbo mode?
We're in turbo mode. So let's put a couple of teams to bed. Can we put the Texans and the Jaguars in dog water?
I wanted to talk about them though.
We can talk about them. We can talk about them, but like let's just sort of put them there for now. We can address the dog water later. Let's just sort of put them. There we go.
We put the Jacksonville.
Now I feel better.
I know everybody is like, oh my God, I came for the Houston Texans talk. David, I don't know if you know, that's what I advertised. I advertised Houston Texans talk, and now you're just like, I don't want to talk about it.
Now we're getting all AFC East teams right now. So let's dive in.
Oh, I see what you did.
Let's dive into the Dolphins.
Almost, maybe you should be hosting the podcast. I will hand the reins over to you. All right, Miami. This is gonna be interesting. Okay, Miami went 9-8 last year and fired their coach. Fired Brian Flores, who then went on to sue the NFL. Replaced him with Mike McDaniel, the San Francisco 49ers offensive coordinator. Who do they add in the offseason? Tyreek Hill and Teron Armstead. It's a very good offseason. That's a very good offseason there from the Miami Dolphins. Adding, again, I called him earlier, probably the most dynamic wide receiver in the NFL. Just in terms of ability and speed and stuff like that, just a playmaker with the ball in his hands. Teron Armstead, one of the better tackles in the league. Also getting Raheem Mostert, Connor Williams, and Chase Edmonds. Chase Edmonds and Raheem Mostert is a fun 1-2 punch in the backfield, especially with Mike McDaniel, what he's going to do.
Just signed, while we were doing this podcast, they just signed Sony Michel.
He was a free agent?
Apparently. I didn't know that either.
I did not. That's interesting. Okay, that's an interesting 1-2-3 punch there with Raheem Mostert, Chase Edmonds, Sony Michel. They lost Devontae Parker, Jesse Davis, and Matt Collins, who was a key special teamer for them. And then in the draft, they only had 4 picks, all draft, but they get Channing Tindall, linebacker, Eric Izukanma, who was a wide receiver. Cameron Good, and then also they get their franchise quarterback in Skylar Thompson. So Dolphins, it's hard to say with the Dolphins because you look at that offense, you look at the schemes and the system that Mike McDaniel is going to run, and you look at his pieces, at his weapons, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki. That line should be better with Teron Armstead. You look at the backfield, and then you got Tua.
And then you look at the quarterback and you're like, oh, right, this team is fooling themselves.
And you got a big question mark at quarterback. Their defense, I like Christian Wilkins a lot, really not bounced back, but he kind of took a step forward, especially toward the end of last year. Andrew Van Ginkel, Landon Roberts, Jerome Baker, Xavier Howard, Byron Jones. It's a defense with the names.
Here's the thing. I understand that they kept the previous defense coordinator from Brian Flores' staff, and I'm sure that matters to a lot of people. This defense was successful because it was Brian Flores' defense. I understand that this other dude was calling the plays. I get that, but this was Brian Flores' defense. He made it. It's in his image, so to speak. Losing Brian Flores matters for that defense. They have a ton of really good players. I like Andrew Van Ginkel, who unfortunately reminds me so freaking much of Rob Ninkovich when he was on the Patriots. Jalen Phillips is a legit player who had a great rookie season last year. Xavier Howard and Byron Jones are probably the best corner duo in the NFL. And Javon Holland was really good for them at safety last year down the stretch. And that was when Javon Holland was starting to get playing time and really got integrated into that defense. That's when they really started to catch fire again. And Channing Tindall is no slouch as a rookie linebacker.
I know, good pick in the third round.
But man, I do not believe in Tua to be more than just a mid-tier type of quarterback. And I think that this defense is not going to quite be the same without Brian Flores. They're still going to be good, but I just don't know. And Mike McDaniel, who a lot of people think very highly of, and for good reason. Again, first-year head coach and has a lot of responsibilities on his plate, and is doing that with a quarterback that he doesn't like. He didn't pick. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to do with this team. Part of me wants to say crummy. Part of me wants to say mid. I think they have too much talent for me to actually put them at crummy, so I'm going to put them at mid.
Right. Knowing the teams that we are probably ultimately going to put in crummy, I cannot put them in crummy. As you said, too much talent to put them there. But it is interesting with Tua. David, I don't know if you saw the graphics this week that compared Tua's first 2 season statistics with Josh Allen's first 2 season statistics.
Again, I'm going to start cyberbullying people.
No, you're looking at the same year.
Listen, as a statement on the Cover One Roundup podcast, we do not endorse bullying, cyber, in real life or otherwise. It does work, though.
You got on me earlier because I made an innocent until proven guilty joke, and now you're out here saying bullying works.
I do not endorse this. I do not endorse bullying of any kind. I have never once said that. I do not endorse this as a part of my administration. However,
we're getting canceled. This is the last episode, so we might as well go out here on top, go out with a bang. Okay, but yes, I do think Dolphins are mid. Dolphins are mid with potential, I guess, but less potential. I think they're like at the back end of mid. There is like a gap even here between Colts and Dolphins. But again, that offense should be fun if they get to doing what Tua does best and in a Tua-friendly role with that offense, which again could work. Apparently, Mike McDaniel had a hell of a pitch, a hell of a plan for Tua. That's part of what landed him the job. Which, everything looks good on paper, though. When Mike McDaniel drew it up and said this is what's going to happen, I'm sure it was great. But we'll see if it actually happens. Do you want to talk about Jacksonville now or straight to the Jets?
We can sort of quickly go to Jacksonville. So they bring in Doug Peterson. Yep. Trent Baalke is unfortunately still in charge of things there, as is evidenced by their entire draft class. Doug Peterson is going to do a lot better than Urban Meyer. Of course, that's not a particularly high bar to clear. I think this is probably like a 5 to 6, maybe a 7-win team. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there's so many question marks with this team. I don't know what to make of this receiving core. They're so weird there. I mean, like,
it's an amalgamation of other teams' castaways and rejects.
Pretty much. And then they paid them way more money than they're
worth. Right. Which wasn't that the rumor a couple of weeks ago, like after they signed those deals, where it was like NFL GMs are just kind of pretending those didn't happen. Like they're kind of pretending that, those players didn't sign those deals, because if they're acknowledged, that resets the whole receiver market in not a great way, which the market was ultimately reset. But
and they bring in some pretty good defense players. I don't really know what to make of Trayvon Walker as like a major impact player, because I think he's going to be sort of a chess piece to move around their defense. Josh Allen, the Jacksonville Josh Allen, is still there, and he's a legit player. I like Devin Lloyd. I like Chad Muma. I think that's a really interesting pair of linebackers to build your defense with. It's a little weird that they took both of them, though, in the same draft. It's a little weird. I don't know. This whole team just kind of seems like, this is the year to kind of figure out what you actually have and what you really need to build around, and also like feel good about Trevor Lawrence, because he had a rough rookie season, and it's understandable because Urban Meyer was a disaster among disasters. But I do think that Doug Peterson will be able to work really well with Trevor Lawrence. I think that's a really good pairing. And that's really all that this season is about. Figure out what you have going for you and make sure Trevor Lawrence is on the right trajectory.
Right. They're going to be, I wouldn't say a fun team, but, they're going to be a really fun Madden rebuild team.
Exactly. That's what matters.
Right. And that's all that matters. For a team that I don't like, that's all I want. But no, Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne coming back, all those young players defensively, going to be a fun team to kind of keep an eye on, see how they're progressing, if they are progressing. Nothing really to worry about, I would say, although they did beat the Bills. So what do you know? What do I know?
The Bills beat the Bills in that game.
That is true. Moving on to the Jets, David, the team that you have long said poses the greatest long-term threat to the Buffalo Bills in the AFC East. Does that threat start coming this year? Well, let's look at it. They were 4-13 last year, adding in the offseason through free agency. CJ Uzama, nice under-the-radar addition there. Laken Tomlinson, DJ Reed, Tyler Conklin. They also signed Greg DeLeg, who I didn't know. I didn't realize that they signed Greg Zerline, but good for them. They lose Marcus May, Jamison Crowder, and Morgan Moses. And then the draft, I mean, you'd be probably hard-pressed to find a better draft class in the NFL. Their top 4 picks being Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, Jermaine Johnson, Breece Hall. This team on paper looks like they're going to be a real AFC contender in 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years. Right now, I don't know, right? Because Zach Wilson showed promise last year, especially after he came back from injury, but not I don't know. Breece Hall, everyone knows I love Breece Hall. Anyone who watches this podcast knows how I feel about Breece Hall, Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, Garrett Wilson. It's a fun young team. They have Carl Lawson coming back, or actually debuting defensively. And they have pieces defensively: Quinnen Williams, CJ Mosley, Quincy Williams, who kind of came out of nowhere last year, and then Ahmad Gardner. Look, it's a fun young team that's going to win 6 games. I think that's, or
6
7 games. You think less?
I think this might be like an 8-win team, or if a lot of things go their way, this could be a 9-win team. Honestly,
maybe. Again, I could see that happening, but I'm thinking C tier. If I had to put them in a tier right now, I'd put them in C
like
tier.
I'm content with putting them in C tier, but they could end the year as like a mid tier type of team, in my opinion.
Sure.
Like
third in the AFC East.
I unfortunately really like the trajectory of the Jets. I think one of the weird question marks with this team is what the hell is going on with Mekhi Becton? Does anyone know? Because
he hurt last year?
He was hurt, but they're talking about him like he doesn't really want to be there, and it's really weird. And I don't really know. There seems to be a very strained relationship between the Jets and Mekhi Becton right now, which is a shame because I really liked Mekhi Becton when he came out of the draft.
Had a really good debut year too.
Yeah, I'm a little confused of what's happening there. That might be something that really holds them back if they're not able to address what's going on there or fix whatever the issue is there. But yeah, I mean, this is a team whose trajectory is going up. Dolphins fans keep trying to delude themselves like, oh, Josh Allen, his first 2 years were like Tua's. And if we're going to compare someone to Josh Allen in this division, it's Zach Wilson, obviously. Yeah. Like Zach Wilson is at least similar in skill set. He's certainly not as physically gifted because Zach Wilson is like 6 foot or whatever and doesn't have the same arm strength, but he has good arm talent. He has a ton of mobility. I think that there is that sort of indescribable quality about him that just he's got something to him that a lot of people like and gravitate. Yeah, and I think people gravitate towards that. So I think that the Jets are going to be a good team in 2023. I think they are still in that reconstruction mode and kind of figuring things out right now. Their defense definitely going to be better with Jermaine Johnson and Carl Lawson. And of course, Sauce Gardner is just going to be great for them. That is such a great fit for that defense. But I think that they're a C tier, sort of a 7 to maybe 9 win type of team.
I agree. Again, just to wrap it up, because I think there was a Jets fan in here earlier who has since left.
That's right.
But we had a Jets fan in here last year too. I do agree that long term the Jets are set up for some success here. They've had a couple of really good drafts in a row. Yeah, but just not. They're in it for the long haul, right? It's a process,
right. And that's part of it, right? It's just like you have to just be
He's still here.
He's still here. Hey, shout out Jets gang. Good for you.
Can't be mad with 7. Exactly. No, it's going to be a fun establishing year that you can build on going forward. But playoffs this year, I don't know.
There's going to be some frustrating losses for them because they're going to be like, man, we were like that close in a couple. I can totally see that happening. I think 7 to 9 wins is what you're looking at for this Jets team, and that's going to be a really good step forward for them.
Moving on to the New England Patriots, who, again, hard team to judge because you look at the moves they made on paper and you're like, what are they doing? You look at their draft and you're like, what are they doing?
You look at their coaching staff and you wonder, what are they doing?
Who's going to be calling the plays? You just don't know. There are so many unknowns with this team, but then you look at the coach, you look at Bill Belichick and you're like, oh, okay. Should this have been a 10-win team last year? Probably not. But again, the team finishes 10-7, second in the AFC East, pushed the Bills for most of the season, beat the Bills one time, led the AFC East for a period of time there, and then they got dominated in the playoffs, but it is what it is. Looking at their offseason additions, Devontae Parker, Jabril Peppers, Ty Montgomery, Terrence Mitchell. Offseason losses, they traded Shaq Mason to the Buccaneers for some reason, and
then replaced him with Cole Strange in the first
round.
We'll
get into that. We'll get into
draft dodger, Cole Strange.
What?
Cole Strange was originally at the Air Force Academy, did cadet training, was there and started like 6 games for them, and then transferred to UTC.
How is he a draft dodger?
Because I correct me if I'm wrong, but like if you go through that training, but you don't like complete it or something.
Oh, that may be. As you can probably tell by looking at me, I've never looked into military service. I've never considered military service. But hey, we'll see. We'll see if he dodges the draft. If we're not getting into Russia, Ukraine, but this is going to be a Russia Ukraine podcast, though. But no. So looking at their losses, they trade Shaq Mason, lose J.C. Jackson, Kyle Van Noy, Dante Hightower, Ted Karras, Jakob Johnson, who's just a fullback. But I mean, anyone who watched the Patriots last year knows that he played a role. He joined McDaniels in Las Vegas. We'll get into next. And then in the draft, an interesting draft to say the least. Cole Strange in the first round there at the end of the first round. From where he was from Tennessee, Chattanooga, correct?
Yep.
Chattanooga, great city. I've never been, but just a great name, Chattanooga. Wide receiver Tyquan Thornton. They took 2 corners, Marcus Jones and Jack Jones. Then they took 2 running backs. And then they also took Bailey Zappi, which I said on the live show for the day 3 draft. I was like, look, he could honestly be the offensive coordinator. That may be why he was drafted. They drafted him to call plays because that was kind of like his brain was his strongest asset, right? I read a quote about Bailey Zappi where it was like, if I was playing flag football, he would be the first overall pick, which is the greatest quote maybe I've ever read about a football player. Besides DeShone Kizer one time said about himself, I have Tom Brady's brain in Cam Newton's body, which is pound for pound the greatest football quote of all time. That's off topic. New England. It's hard again because you look at this team on paper, you look at Mac Jones, you look at who else do they have? Who is their receiving core? Jacoby Myers, Devontae Parker, who they acquired, Kendrick Bourne. They have Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson in the backfield. Oh, sorry. Nelson Aguilar, Hunter Henry. And then defensively, Dietrich Wise, Devon Godshaw, who's good. Judon.
So Kyle, is the difficulty here trying to figure out if they belong in crummy or dog water, or
the difficulty is I don't want to look stupid. Well, I guess a lot of these I already could look stupid on, but I don't want to be the person who is saying like, oh no, the Patriots are actually bad, and then Bill Belichick does what Bill Belichick does, and they win 10 games again.
So what? They're a crummy team. That's what they are.
They are on paper.
That's that. I don't know how else to put it. Like
they got worse in the offseason too.
They got worse in the offseason. They lost their best player in J.C. Jackson. What are we supposed to do with that? say like, "Oh, it's fine." No, it's like, no, this is not fine. Things are not normal.
And say what you will about Mac Jones, but I don't know if Mac Jones showed enough. Like he's
Mac
going
Jones
to
is a perfectly
put a
fine and good quarterback,
he's
but
not
what
going to
he
put a
showed as a
subpar team on
rookie,
his back. And
what he showed as a rookie is what he's going to be for the rest of his career. He's not a transcendent player. He's just not. That's fine when you have a ton of talent on your team.
yeah,
But right now, the Patriots don't have that. They're a crummy team
did they
with a
get
crummy
him
coaching staff.
a weapon? They got him Devontae Parker. Who is he a needle mover? Does Devontae Parker move the needle for anyone?
Like
A
that.
smidge, just a little
A
bit.
smidge. Forward, to be clear.
Right, yeah. They were okay last year, but they got worse. They did get worse. I'm gonna look stupid, man. We're gonna look like idiots, but I guess they kind of have to be in C tier. That's a crummy team on paper. I'm sorry. I'm
not. I don't care.
I'm issuing an apology to Patriots fans. They're gonna come after me. They're gonna come after me when they inevitably win 10 games and they're like, hey, Raiders. Look, Raiders are a sneaky B team. They're a sneaky. 10-7 last year, second in the AFC West, make the playoffs. Then they get rid of Bisaccia. Was that his name?
Yes, Rich Bisaccia.
Great name. Again, all these Italians in the NFL. Right. Josh McDaniels, they bring him in the offseason. Josh McDaniels, a great track record as an AFC West head coach. And then looking at their additions, though, interesting additions. Chandler Jones signs a big deal, one of the better pass rushers in the NFL, who a lot of Bills fans had their eyes on this offseason. Bills got a better one, but Chandler Jones still a good addition. They trade for Davante Adams, for my money, the best wide receiver in the NFL, just does a bunch of stuff well. Also, their other big offseason acquisition was Vernon Butler. Great addition there. And then Rocky Yassin, they acquire him from the Colts for Ngakoue. Also signed Jakob Johnson. Losses include Yannick Ngakoue, Quentin Jefferson, Solomon Thomas, Zay Jones, Casey Hayward. In the draft, they had Dylan Parham and Zamir White. Look, Derek Carr is a very underrated quarterback. Derek Carr is very good. And they get not only do they pair him with, as I said, for my money, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, but they also pair him with his college teammate, who is one of his best friends. That's just going to be dynamite. That's going to be electric, I think. And again, they have Hunter Renfrow. Say what you will about Josh Jacobs, but I think Josh Jacobs is a competent running back. Brian Edwards there, Darren Waller, fun offense. Defensively, Max Crosby, Chandler Jones. This is defense has some question marks, but I like the offense. I'm willing to put the Raiders at the bottom of B tier here.
I agree, because I think that even though their roster on the whole is not like super incredible, where they're good, they're amazing. And like the positions where they're good are the positions that matter most.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that could just carry them to enough wins where like it could totally just be based on matchup, where they just take advantage of their talent at those positions and just dominate through that particular way. And like, say what you will about Josh McDaniels, he was a total snake to the Colts and a complete douchebag in Denver. The man is one of the best offensive minds in the NFL. He's the reason the NFL runs the spread offense at all right now. He and him with Derek Carr and Davante Adams and Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow, that's legit so amazing for them. And it's going to be really, really great. So I'm putting them in mid tier. And they could really be a legitimate team.
They're like all of these teams, right? All the B tier teams.
Yep.
Slash there.
Right.
Right. All of these teams, good potential, will be good teams, potential to make noise. Moving on. The Ravens. I thought we were going to the Steelers. We're going to, don't worry, Raiders are going. Better watch out, Buffalo. I love it. I would love a Buffalo Raiders AFC Championship. That would be dynamite. Can you imagine Buffalo fans in Vegas?
That'd be fun. That would be fun.
Buffalo fans in Vegas. The Buffalo economy would cripple. It would be incredible. Someone clip that. That's my greatest quote I've ever said out of this shit. The Buffalo economy would cripple. It would be incredible.
Oh, God. We got to go. We got three.
Ravens are like a teetering team, upper B, low A, in my opinion. The Ravens are a team where, look, they are perennially good, always a competitor. The story typically is when they're not good. That's the bigger story, is when they're not good. And last year they were not great. 8-9, fourth in the NFC North or AFC North. This is an AFC show, and I'm talking about the NFC. Jesus, but no, fourth in the AFC North. But again, that was a very strong division last year. Figures to be a very strong division again this year. But look, I think they're going to bounce back a bit. Lamar should be healthy. Offseason additions include Marcus Williams, Morgan Moses, Calais Campbell re-signed. They lose Tavon Young, Sammy Watkins, Latavius Murray, and they traded Hollywood Brown for a first-round pick. Who'd they get with that first-round pick? Kyle Hamilton, which leads me to this. They had an insane draft, and this happens every single year. This always happens where the Ravens just somehow, I don't know how they do it, they always have one of the best drafs.
They just don't overthink anything. They don't overthink anything. They don't reach for players except for the punter, I guess. But they have clear objectives on their board, and they're just like, hey, this is the guy that we want, or this is just a good player. Let's just take this guy. Like, it's really not that complicated for them. So here's the thing. Ravens offense, it's still going to be very run heavy. I am looking forward to seeing J.K. Dobbins healthy.
Finally see J.K. Dobbins.
Lamar is amazing. He really is. I think that a healthy, oh my gosh, what is that dude's name? Number 18, went to Minnesota, the University of Minnesota. Who's their receiver? Rashad Bateman.
Wow. Bateman.
Yeah. I think he's a really great fit for that offense. I think he's really going to help Lamar Jackson a lot. I think that defense is going to take a huge step forward because Marcus Williams is a legit safety, and then they drafted Kyle Hamilton. Having those two with Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters is actually insane, and I think it's going to really carry them a long way in that division. I will put them in the A tier right now.
I agree. Hey, look, we're moving now.
Let's do it.
But no, I mean, this is Mark Andrews. They add Charlie Kolar and Isaiah Likely in the draft. They add Tyler Linderbaum, Daniel Falele. How do you pronounce that? There's a lot of letters, a lot of vowels. They lost Hollywood, though. They did lose Hollywood, who then came out and said, I was double teamed all the time. And people were like, what? What games were you watching or playing? But they're going to be a good team. Again, bottom A tier seems fair to me. I'm expecting a big bounce back from the Baltimore Ravens, assuming they can stay healthy. Again, this is all assuming they can stay healthy. Baltimore is going to be a very tough team to play. All right, so moving on here. Who's next? The Steelers. Ooh,
crummy.
Like Steelers, we may have no choice but to say crummy. Again,
they are who they are. I mean, this really is not going to be that much different from the team they were last year, right? Like Mitch Trubisky / Kenny Pickett are going to be better than Roethlisberger because they can actually throw the ball more than 10 yards down the field. But I think they're better fits for what Matt Canada wants to do on offense because they can actually move as well. Mm-hmm. But like, this is still a defensive heavy team that's going to run the ball a billion times, and they're going to be a weird, competitive, hard to beat team that like might sneak their way into the playoffs as a 7th seed. But they're still going to be a crummy team even if they do that. Like.
Right, like last year, 9-7-1 weren't a good team.
Even Roethlisberger didn't want to be in the playoffs. He was like, I'm just going to go out there and have fun.
Right, yeah. He said, we're probably not.
He was so mad that he had to play a playoff game. He was like, oh, God, I can't do this. And I already had my great send-off in Pittsburgh, and now I got to go out here and embarrass myself?
I have to go to Kansas City? Not great, but it is what it is. Again, Big Ben retiring, replacing him with either Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett. Take your pick. I don't think either is a playoff caliber quarterback right now. So the question is the roster around them playoff caliber? Looking at their roster, Najee Harris, good running back. The receiving core, question marks, potentially good. Deontay Johnson had a great year last year. Chase Claypool kind of took a step back, sophomore slump a little bit. And then George Pickens, George Pickens, a lot of people, I guess George Pickens did something, because a lot of people were like, oh, no, I would not draft George Pickens. But a lot of other people were like, no, he's a great player. I would take him in the first round. So I guess Pittsburgh is a spot for like a dude who you just kind of want to keep out of the limelight, because they have a demonstrated track record of keeping people out of the limelight. Look at Antonio Brown. Didn't really hear about him until he left Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Or you did a little bit, but obviously became much more. He became much more animated after he left Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
What else do they have? A receiver. They also draft Calvin Austin, who could be a fun piece offensively. I'm reading here they have Anthony Miller, who was my OG draft crush like a couple years ago. I was a huge Anthony Miller fan. Let's producer pull that up.
Producer, pull this up. He's doing some great work tonight. Shout out to our producer. Yes, he is on the Steelers.
On to it. Tyson Alualu. Cameron Hayward also drafted his brother, who's a tight end, kind of. Then T.J. Watt, Devin Bush, Miles Jack, Terrell Edmonds. Terrell Edmonds. But then they also have Minka Fitzpatrick, and they signed Levi Wallace, who we all know who Levi Wallace is. Very good corner. Very serviceable cornerback.
Levi Wallace and Akella Witherspoon being paid what they're being paid is probably like one of the better values in the NFL, honestly. I think those two are really good fits for what they do defensively, and they're on the cheap. That is no money for two legitimate starting cornerbacks. The Steelers are who they are. They've been this way for the last couple of years, and it's not going to change with this season. Mike Tomlin's still a good coach. They're going to win 8, 9. Heck, you could even say 10 games, honestly. And it's going to piss me off that they do it. But they are still just a crummy team, regardless of that. They're the best of the crummy teams. I will give them that.
So are we saying, even if they prove us wrong, we're not wrong?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Which is very convenient for me, personally.
They're still going to be crummy, even if they make the playoffs.
They are. It's a terrible thing to say, but it's true.
I'm not particularly excited to watch either Kenny Pickett or Mitchell Trubisky next year. I like Najee Harris. I'm intrigued to see what George Pickens does. I'm not, I also love, just as we really need to get going here, but we only have 2 teams left. I love how the draft narrative around Kenny Pickett. Sorry, I was combining names there. The draft narrative was his hands are so small, he needs to play in a southern city or in a dome. But he played at Pitt, he played college football in Pittsburgh. And then the Steelers just take him, and they're like, no, he did really well here. We don't really care about the small hands thing. It's fine. He has gloves.
Sure.
But moving on, Houston. Look, we'll really gloss over Houston. Go 4-13, fire David Culley, promote Lovie Smith to head coach.
For no reason.
Did they get worse in the offseason? Maybe.
No. Because I like their draft. Getting Kenyon Green, getting Derek Stingley, getting John Mechie. They kept Brandon Cooks. John Mechie and Brandon Cooks is a better receiving core than some teams have right now. Let's be honest. It's better than what the Ravens have.
Yeah.
But hey, hot take. Hot take. That is not so hot because a lot of people have said it already, but Davis Mills was the best performing 2021 NFL rookie quarterback last year.
Yeah.
Other than maybe Mac Jones.
Mm-hmm. No, that's not a crazy take.
Yeah.
But they add AJ Kahn. Poor AJ Kahn goes from the Jags to the Texans. Oh, geez.
Hey, that was his choice. He was a free agent. He could do whatever he wanted.
Right, but was it like, imagine you escape Jacksonville, you're like, "I'm finally going to another team," and the only call you get is Houston. You're like, "Ah,
Gotta do
what
what you
have I
can,
done?"
man.
At that point, I start looking like, Canadian cities. I'm like, I'm gonna go to Toronto for a year just to see,
God.
just to try Canadian life. Maybe NFL
So
Europe's gonna relaunch. Um,
so Lovie Smith as head coach gives me absolutely nothing. Especially because they're still running Tampa 2. Like I talked about Gus Bradley running that Seattle cover 3 belligerently and like militantly to his own detriment. That's Lovie Smith with Tampa 2. Like it's so dated. It's coached poorly, and it's not going to do anything. And drafting Derek Stingley, like a legit athletic, rare man-to-man cover corner to play in this Tampa 2 makes no sense. All of that really just suggests to me that Lovie Smith is exactly who we think he is, and that he's just a band-aid until they finally feel confident enough to hire Josh McCown as their head coach.
It's so weird. It's so weird. I don't like Houston, man. I think that's
Poverty
just
franchise, which is
it
a shame
really is.
because I like what Nick Caserio has done as a general manager since he's been brought in there, but like nothing's really going to make a difference if you make dumbass decisions like hiring Josh McCown as your head coach.
Which they're gonna do next year or in 2 years.
Who
Again,
knows?
it's a good draft. Derek Stingley, Kenyon Green, Jalen Petrie, John Mechie, who knows if he'll be ready
Yeah.
to go for the season. Christian Harris, Damian Pierce. They're a team that has pieces for the
Yeah.
future, but just nothing that management outside of their GM. It goes further than the GM.
There's so many problems.
It
with
goes
the
above
Texans.
him,
Yeah.
and it's just a fundamentally
And if you
poorly
ask
run
Jack Easterby,
organization.
it probably goes to God.
It does. It goes straight to God. Is God to blame for the Houston Texans?
Yes.
Okay, that's all we need to talk about with this. That wraps that up.
All right, last team, Tennessee Titans.
Tennessee.
So let's agree. B, mid-tier? Yes?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
right here.
Yeah,
Maybe
I'm okay with
here,
that.
but probably.
Yeah.
I'll.
I'd say put him behind the Raiders, yeah. Tannehill just like is who he is. He's a really good
He's
regular
not a
season
mentor.
quarterback who
Hell
just
no.
fails in the playoffs. He's definitely not a mentor either, apparently. Good for you, I guess. But I mean, Treylon Burks is a really exciting wide receiver prospect. Relying on him in year one to be the guy is asking a lot, in my opinion, of somebody who was not all that experienced as a route runner in college. He's got great physical tools. That's why he was a first round pick, but I am concerned about him as like the de facto number one wide receiver for that team. Derrick Henry, hurt for most of last year, was effective when he played, but even in that playoff game, he was not good. He was bad. The Bengals totally shut down Derrick Henry in that playoff game. And I'm not going to sit here and say Derrick Henry is going to be bad this year, but he's also not getting any younger. And
right,
running backs,
there's
running backs,
a lot
aged,
of tread on the tire.
Running backs age like milk and sat
not.
in the sun. Like that is what they are. And maybe Derrick Henry is just different. He is one of those guys who really is just built different, but at a certain point, that's going to catch up to you.
Yes.
Honestly, I think this is going to be sort of more or less what they were last year, where they were very reliant on defense and great special teams play. And I think their defense is actually pretty good. I think their special teams play is always going to be great with Mike Vrabel as head coach, but that's really only going to take you so far. And last year they went pretty far with it being the number one seed. I just don't know if they can squeeze out those games like they did last year in the same way. And it just I don't really see them as a great team, but they are really well coached. I do think that they have enough talent on defense and special teams and even on offense to make life difficult for a lot of teams. So I'm comfortable putting them in the B tier. It would not surprise me if they just sort of are better than the dog water of the rest of their division, but not like a legitimate team in that's contending. So yeah.
Yeah, the Titans, I've said it for years. They consistently prove me wrong. They consistently win, but every year I'm just like, I'm not particularly scared of the Titans. Like, there's really nothing that they do that, besides Derrick Henry, that has ever really been all that scary to me. And like you said, Derrick Henry, I still expect that he'll be good. But he'll still probably be Derrick Henry. Let's be real. But even so, I think that offense as a whole is taking a step back. Ryan Tannehill kind of came back down to earth a little bit. They get rid of AJ Brown's Julio Jones acquisition really didn't work out, but so they kind of moved on from that chapter. Treylon Burks and Robert Woods are their 1-2 right now. Robert Woods coming off an injury. And then with Treylon Burks, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what they do with Treylon Burks, but there's just nothing here. But like you said, they're going to win probably 10 games, probably might win their division, but I'm going to be like right there every step of the way, like, oh no, this isn't a great team. They'll beat the Bills in week 2, and I'll be like, oh no, they're still not
that's going to be the worst part, is when they beat the Bills on Monday Night Football. Stupid. All right, that wraps it up. We are so deep into this. We gotta go.
And we held a very solid audience throughout the entire thing. So thank you all for watching. Very much appreciated for everyone who tuned in for any of it, let alone the entire thing. So thank you again. Make sure to follow Cover One on Twitter, on all social media, at Cover One in some variation of that. Make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel and to the podcast feeds. All of the Cover One shows, they all have different podcast feeds. Subscribe to them if you feel so inclined. Leave 5-star reviews, maybe. Perhaps check out Cover One Premium. There you will have access to the Cover One Premium Slack, where you can talk to a bunch of Bills fans and also your favorite Cover One personalities, and even some exclusive content on the website. Eric just put out, I think it was a premium article about James Cook. Very nice piece about James Cook and what he's bringing to the offense. So check that out. What else? I think that's it. David,
follow us on Twitter.
Where can people
you can follow me at DFAUXY at DFoxy. You can find some very moderate and lukewarm and semi-informed takes on there. Where can people find you, Kyle?
You can find me. We got War Master in chat. We got a couple minutes to kill here. Titans own the Bills every year. You're not wrong. And that's the thing. And that's why I'm a crazy person, because the Titans beat the Bills. At least they have in the past couple of years. Again, a COVID adversity game. And then, and then last year. But every year I'm just like, yeah, they beat the Bills. But, maybe they're just not a good matchup. But I think Bills are probably the better team. You can follow me on Twitter at Kyle Silagyi. Okay. Thank you guys for watching. We will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.